Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. Today we're taking a look at The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas, a book that was released in September of 2022 and is one that I've been really looking forward to reviewing. As always, we're going to start by looking at the story, moving on to then world building, characters, writing style, and we shall end on my thoughts on this book. So without wasting any time, let's just jump straight in. The story focuses on Tio, who is the son of the Jade goddess Quetzal. It's important to mention straight off the bat that there is a hierarchy here in terms of god power and god-child power as well. Sol is kind of the overgod, whose remains have been scattered around the world in the case of soul stones, and these soul stones are used to help protect the world from the obsidian gods, who were locked away centuries before, as well as primordial creatures from before the beginning of time. In between those, you have the gold gods, who are very aloof and tend to be more powerful, and whose children tend to be trained, especially from an early age, almost as heroes or rescuers for the realms. And then you have the jade gods, of which Tio is the child of one, and they tend to live more in harmony with the world and interact more with mortals. Tio is a transgender female to male character, something that does play into the character. I will touch on that a bit later on. And they are selected for the Sunbearer Trials. The Sunbearer Trials occur once every 10 years, and it is the mechanism by which the soul stones are recharged throughout the world to maintain the prison around these sort of ancient eldritch creatures and these baneful gods. However, generally speaking, it is only the children of gold that are selected for this. So the fact that Tio is selected, and he's not the only Jade that's selected as well, is sort of a cause for confusion in a lot of the golds. Gold children are trained from an early age, as already mentioned, to compete in stuff like this and to act almost like heroes. So a lot of people are left with a great deal of confusion, as this is an unusual occurrence. The story then follows Tio as he moves around various cities that they go to compete over the 5 trials. There's a few twists and turns in here, especially once you hit trial 4. You definitely start to see that there's some other underlying problem or something occurring that's throwing everything out slightly, and that becomes blatantly clear once you hit the 5th trial and then when the actual Sunbearer ceremony itself occurs. The other thing of note is the person who finishes at the bottom of the rankings during the Sunbearer Trials becomes the sacrifice, and it is their lifeblood after their sacrifice that is taken to recharge the soul stones to help maintain the prison where the gods have been locked away. Pretty good story. It's probably the weakest part of this book, but it's by no means bad. It moves at a good clip all the way through, and I have to say, once I'd finished this book, I was really disappointed to find out that the second one isn't out yet and doesn't as yet have a release date, but I really enjoyed this story. So this moves us on to world building, and the book actually starts out with, for want of a better word, a creation myth and the story of how the world was formed and how humanity came to be, and how the gods came to be as well, and how their various stations were decided. This is important as we are following the literal children of the gods. The world building is exceptionally good in this. You have various different occasions as you wander through the world, and you see how different each of the gods' cities are to each other, and how much that each city kind of represents the god that's kind of the presiding one that's there. As an example, the home of Tio is this sort of sprawling town. Birds and people and everything just interact constantly, whereas when you go to some of the other towns, it's especially for like the golds, the mortals are kind of kept away if the gods or the godchildren are going anywhere, and you actually get this sense of worship and adoration. It's a very different level of celebrity, for want of a different word. The gold very much feel and appear like celebrities in this book, whereas Tio and the Jades feel almost like hometown heroes in many regards. The world is beautifully described all the way through. What really sets this book apart as well, compared to a lot of books that are quite similar to this in many regards, is the fact that it leans more into Central American mythology, stuff like that. So it's a very different setting in many regards. It's really good to see a different thing used rather than your normal Roman, Greek or Egyptian mythology as well. You also get clear differences in how people interact with each other based on what sort of god they are, and you see between the ghouls and the jade there's this sort of almost a superiority thing from some of the ghouls, although that's not unique to everyone. But the world building is exceptionally well done here. It's really vividly described, and you can see as it's described through the pages what this world will look like, and it is truly beautifully done. That moves us on to characters, and just like in the case of world building, the characterisation in here is especially well done. I'm going to leave Tio to last for a couple of different reasons, but just touching on the supporting cast, there are a number of characters in here which, whilst they don't get a huge amount of character depth, they do get various layers peeled back a little bit, so you get a clear sense of what these people and these demigods are about and what matters to them. And when some of them start acting slightly out of normal, it's actually commented on by a couple of the characters, mentioning that they're not normally like this. On top of that, in terms of physical characteristics and the way that powers are described as well, they're so intrinsic to the character of the person in a lot of ways that you can't help but sort of link those two together a lot more than normally you would do on something. Now, Tio is really interesting because there's always a danger with certain characters of making their differences their defining trait. You see this in a lot of media where someone's defining trait is their gender or their sexuality or a potential disadvantage or disability that they may have compared to everybody else. And whilst the fact that Tio is trans is a factor in his actual personality, it isn't his actual personality, and that's important because it makes him a far more well-rounded individual. He is brash and he is impulsive all the way through, but he also is very clearly portrayed as having a heart of gold, even if it's a case of he's putting himself in situations where he can't possibly succeed. If he thinks it's the right thing, he will do that, and it gives him a moral compass that you don't often see in protagonists in stories. The other thing about this is it's very much a coming of age and acceptance story in many ways for Tio. So in terms of his relationship to the Golds, he had a very close relationship to one of the Golds called Aurelio, who is actually participating in these trials. However, as they grew older and grew apart and Aurelio went to the academy, that sort of shifted and it fostered a sense of resentment in Tio. And you end up examining that a little bit, and part of the resentment becomes the fact that there's a bit of a romantic interest going on here, and it's quite well done because Tio sort of hates the fact that this is how it's making him feel. The other thing to mention in here is Tio's wings. So as he is the child of Quetzal, who is a god of birds, the Quetzal as a bird itself is one that has different plumage for male to female, and it is mentioned that he hides his wings away in embarrassment because when he transitioned, his wings stayed the plumage of a female, as Quetzals by nature, females have different plumage to males, and he was ashamed of that and he didn't accept his wings as part of who he was. And there's one point in the trial where he realises he needs his wings and they're part of him and he needs to utilise them, and at that moment his wings, when he opens them, have actually transformed into the bright plumage of a male Quetzal. There's also scenes where he's trying to help another trans character, who is the other Jade, who's been selected in this, and it is quite tastefully done. There's a little bit of humour here that may fall flat for a few people, but one of the best written characters I've read in quite a long time, and the character work in general is top notch in this book. Now that moves us on to writing style, and this book is actually surprisingly dense. It comes in at just over 400 pages, and after I'd read the first quarter I thought I'd read a lot more, and I mean that as a compliment. There is a lot of descriptive work here in terms of physical world building, and you do get true senses of personality from all of the characters. There is natural downtime as well between all of the various different set pieces that are in here in the trials and so on and so forth. And that actually really helps flesh out the characters as well and gives that bit of breathing space you need before the next sort of action heavy, for want of a better word, point of the story. The plotting is really well done, and it is well paced as well, which is quite difficult to do with ones like this. Quite often you have quite a slow ramp up into stories like this, and this avoids those trappings, although it isn't too breakneck at its beginning anyway. On top of that, this is a rare example of a book that has a clear cliffhanger ending that makes you want to read the next one, and I'm genuinely excited to see how the next one will turn out. But this is a very solidly written book. Like I say, there's a lot in this book, and credit to Aiden Thomas for writing such a dense book that keeps you reading. Really good. So I'm going to keep this nice and simple. You should just read this book. The story is strong, well plotted, well paced, and leaves you wanting more at the end. The world building is vivid and really paints a picture of a world that these gods and godchildren inhabit. You get a sense of the culture through the creation myth and the various iconography you see throughout. And then you have the characters who, as an ensemble cast, are strong and represent various different aspects, and Tio in particular is especially well written. And you get the sense of personal conflict within himself and with the world in general as well, and the sense of struggling to accept a little bit. This is an easy 5-star book for me. In fact, I'd go so far as to say this is going to probably push Old Man's War off the top of my list of my favourite reads of the books that I've done so far as a review. However, I have to ask, have you read this book? Have you read anything else by Aiden Thomas? If you have, are there any you'd recommend me to do next? If you drop it in the comments below, let me know what you think, and if you have enjoyed this video, a like and a subscribe are always appreciated. I'll catch you all next time.